Namo Shivaya, Om 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 Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva is only an aspect of God, an aspect of Om, that aspect which dissolves everything back into himself. But that aspect and all the three aspects of Om, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, all of them should be a part of your life too. There should be a sense of creativity, because God can create through you. You don't really create anything, but if you ask Him, you will find that what you create will always be fresh, new, and right for the occasion. Don't ever think, I've written so many songs, over 400 pieces of music, but I never say, how do I want this melody to go? I always say, God, you show me. I tell Him the kind of mood I'm trying to create, but mind you, if your interest is in writing music, He's not going to give you a mathematical formula. If you're a mathematician, He won't give you a melody. He answers according to how you call to Him. He answers according to what you ask of Him. So if you have even something simple like if you're cooking, I remember my guru was actually a very good cook. One time he came into the room where we all were waiting for him. He was a little bit late, and he said that he'd been cooking something and gotten it just right after years of trying. It was just a very subtle thing, but what you got from him was vibrations, and I think that just right may have had, as almost always it did have, a very subtle meaning that he didn't bother to explain. I suspect he had a very deep spiritual experience there. In fact, in my little fantasy world, perhaps it may not be real, but you remember in the autobiography of a yogi where he met Babaji and he said, please take me with you, and Babaji said, not now, some other time. I couldn't help suspecting, because his expression was so blissful, that it was something on that level. But he didn't talk about his experiences very much. Sometimes he'd let them out of the bag, you might say, but often he kept them to himself. It was just that being around him was just like living in heaven. It was like living with God. He was a manifestation of God, and although he never said, lo, I pronounce and predict and declare that this shall be, and so on, he never talked self-importantly, pompously, never. He was always so natural. He said his guru was the same thing. His guru would say sort of, well, don't you think that may be a mistake? He wouldn't say that's absolutely wrong. He never imposed on your free will. And so Master would give us advice. We'd be wise to listen. But because he didn't give it in a pompous way that made you sort of tremble in your boots, people would often not take it seriously, but he meant it seriously. His lightest word had great power. Living with him, I came to feel that it was like living with God. I felt so much bliss in his presence, and so much changing inwardly. I realized after I'd been with him a short time that I just was not the same person. You aren't who you think you are either. Don't you see? You are only a little shell over that inner self, which is divine. And on your outer shell, which is to say your human personality, you think that you are, let us say a composer, or a mathematician, or a banker, or a housewife, or a cook. You're none of those things. You are the infinite one. I wrote a play many years ago, back about, 1954, in fact. It was called The Jewel in the Lotus. I rewrote it more recently and included in it a humorous character. He was a Bengali merchant who was trying to talk his son out of following the spiritual path and joining him in his business. And the main conversation in the play took place between him, a complete worldling or worldly person, and a storyteller who told stories from the lives of saints and from the Puranas and so on. And at one point, the storyteller says, you are the immortal Atman, and the truth dwells in you. And the merchant says, you see, my boy, you'd better listen to me from now on. And the same storyteller says, no, I mean the same Atman, the same truth dwells in everybody. Well, his son says that. But the joke is, when I say to you that you are that, don't get a big hand. Everybody is that, and every cockroach and every ant and every termite, everything is God. He plays all those different roles. It's just when you sit down and start to contemplate the vastness of this great show and to realize that he himself created that, and he gave to each individual entity the wish to perpetuate itself and to propagate itself. And finally, these different lower forms come after, they say in the Shastras, 5 to 8 million lives up to the human level. And then even at that level, you've got a long way to go, because man has the intelligence to be stupid. Man has the intelligence to make mistakes that animals can't make because they don't discriminate. Man discriminates and gets it all wrong. And he thinks that if I become rich, famous, powerful, etc., he will have what he's looking for, and he doesn't ever find it. And that's why you look around you and you see so many bitter faces, so many sad faces, so few blissful faces, that when you see those, it's just a joy to see them. Why don't you be a channel for that joy? Why not try to share that joy with other people? You will find that the more you share with others in that way, the more joy you have inside. Whereas if you think, well, I can cheat this man and get more wealth and happier and more powerful, and you see that it doesn't work. You get everything except the one thing you're looking for. Bliss, happiness, joy. It's inside. When you meditate and get calm enough, you will suddenly feel this joy coming upon you. It's overwhelming. But the thing about it is that you suddenly realize, well, it's natural. The beautiful thing about such experiences as love and joy and the divine presence is that it's not like learning in school. You don't have to sit there and take notes. No, you just suddenly think, well, of course, that's what I am. That's what Patanjali said. He described enlightenment as smriti, memory. You remember that that's who you are. I now, my guru left his body long ago, I have two kinds of wonderful memories. One is of who I really am. This is something to preoccupy in one's mind. Always remember that you are that. Don't get caught up in other things. Another memory that I have is of having lived with a great Son of God. I have never met anyone greater. I cannot say that there is any level. No one can be greater than great. Once one has God, he has achieved the final. But there was something about my guru, and I don't know if I'm saying this just as a disciple, but I must say, when I find that so many people have read his autobiography and think that he was this sweet and beautiful young man who had the good fortune to meet these great saints, he was much more than that. He was greater. He was to me the greatest, but he was certainly as great as any. They show devotion to one another because they see God in one another. Worldly people see that and they think, well, he's putting himself beneath that. Not at all. When Master went to different saints, he always had this wonderful humility before them, but he was that. They also bowed to him, those who had the greatness to perceive it. But those memories, we used to love listening. I was with him, you might say, well, I might say only 3.5 years, but for people who never met him, that's quite a bit. I was with him as long as the disciples of Jesus were with him in the Bible. But he was in America for many years before that. One of our joys was listening to his first Kriya Yoga disciple in America, reminiscing about the old days. Dr. Lewis told us the following story. When the Master was new in this country, I'd had no experience with anyone of his spiritual stature. Who had, after all, in America? At our first meeting, he looked into my eyes with deep love and asked me, "Will you always love me as I love you?" Imagine saying that to somebody who doesn't even know you. Dr. Lewis said I was deeply moved. Something inside me responded. I answered, yes. Yes, I will. I've always been true to that pledge. I admit, however, that my faith has sometimes been tested. Once back in those days, someone told me false tales against the Master. I didn't believe them, but still, I was a little shaken. I was working in my dental office that day. He was a dentist, and the Master was riding in a streetcar. All at once, he got off, walked several blocks to my office, and entered the door. Walking straight up to me, he looked deep into my eyes and asked, "Do you still love me, Doctor?" What could I do? Of course I melted. My faith was completely restored. He then told me, "Someone borrowed a sum of money from you a while back, isn't that so? You haven't been able to get it back." "That's true," I marveled. "I've been really needing that money." "If you go there now," he said, "you will get it." I went, and indeed, though I'd been waiting a long time, the man gave me what he owed me. Well, the Master knew what Doctor was thinking while he was on that streetcar, and to help him, he got off that streetcar and came. He knew that Dr. Lewis had this, even though Doctor had not spoken about it. He also, I believe, influenced that man's consciousness so that he did give it back, even though he'd been reluctant to give it. Master could influence people's minds. He never did so as a rule, but in a good cause, he did. There was an interesting thing. It'll probably be my bad karma or whatever you want to call it, that this comes up soon in one of these conversations. I don't know. But you know, the Korean War, he told us a very interesting thing. Many people think, oh, the masters don't involve themselves in worldly things. Well, they do when they feel that it's important. When North Korea invaded South Korea, Master told us later, I put that thought in Truman's mind, President Truman's mind, to defend South Korea. He was the one, really, you might say, who was behind that. Would he have been behind the Vietnam War? I doubt it. He said that the reason that he needed to defend South Korea was that the North Koreans and the communists would have taken China, would have gone up into the Aleutian Islands, taken Alaska, and America would have been at war on her own shores. To prevent that from happening, that was the reason behind the Korean War. Somebody asked him once, do people get bad karma fighting on our side in that? He said, no bad karma, because they're fighting a holy war. Many people in India are communists. I want to explain to you that communism as a philosophy is altogether different from communism as practiced. The philosophy of the greatest good for the greatest number is Christian, it's Hindu, it's a good religious philosophy. The issue is how many people practice it. In the years since the Communist Revolution in 1917, Russia and China together have killed more than 100 million of their own people. Not in warfare to defend their country, 100 million of their own people because they suspected their loyalty. Stalin was a monster. My guru used to say that Hitler was a Boy Scout compared to Stalin. Well, look, I'm not here to talk politics. That's not my goal. But I do want you to understand that my guru saw truth as a totality. And the great masters do enter into these things when they feel they have to work with karma. Aurobindo said that he also put that thought, and my guru said the masters put that thought in Hitler's mind, to divide his fronts, to fight Russia and on the Western Front against England and the rest, because by doing that he would weaken his forces and make it possible for him to be defeated. Now the masters did this. It wasn't just by happenstance. They had to work with his karma. They had to allow him to do what he was doing. They had to allow him to go to war. They had to allow him to even persecute people. But they also, through that karma and through Germany's karma, they were able to make him make a drastic mistake, which caused him ultimately to lose the war. On that line, there's a very interesting story that Meera Mata, who was a sister disciple of mine, much older than I, and she told me that she had gone with several of the nuns to see some theatrical performance. And there was a girl sitting in front of her that Meera looked at again and again, just couldn't take her eyes off her. Later, Master said, I saw you, that you were very interested in that little girl. She was probably 3 years old. And Meera said, yes, I don't know why, Master, I just could not take my eyes off her. He said in her last life she died in a German concentration camp. But because she maintained a spiritual attitude, that suffering has made her a saint in this life. And you could see in her that mixture of suffering and sainthood. But many people through that life became much more spiritual. Those who did not, well, it was just another thing to pay off. At least they've had all good karma. But it's so interesting to the memories also of what all the disciples would tell about their life with Master, what I'm able to share with you of what they told and what I have experienced. Those memories are just a wonderful treasure. Partly with that thought in mind, I suppose, I wrote this song called Memories. And it's curious because the chords are very different from my other songs. They're very much modern jazz chords. It's called Memories, and I hope you enjoy it. Joy to you, and God bless you.
Evening garden, silent fountain, glimmering stars in its depths, a sudden leaf falling toward the water, ripples bring memories. Sunshine, laughter, young folk dreaming of a world they would mold. Each girl a fair muse, each boy a hero. Ripples bring memories. Friend, all our lives we spend seeking the stars, thinking them almost at hand. How far must we roam ere our minds turn within, ere we at last understand? Twilight mist falls, old folk linger, dream what they might have done. Youth's shining star